Our history is not what some people want us to think it is. Our history involved a lot of innovative and creative activities in business that allowed us to prosper and to get to the point to where, as I said earlier, we're the most intelligent, having received all of this education over the past 40, 50 years, even before that, but especially between 1968 and now, and having accumulated all of the resources that we have. We've done a lot, but we stand on the shoulders of brothers and sisters who, relatively speaking, did much more. And we should be proud of that, and we should make every effort to not only acknowledge it, but to replicate it, to emulate what they did on a grander scale. So it's not just about, I don't want you to think this is a sexist, gender-oriented aspect of history. The men weren't the only ones who were entrepreneurs. The sisters were entrepreneurs as well. Even during their enslavement, sisters made things and did things and sold them to others. There was a lady named Loranie Butler. She owned and managed a cargo hauling business as far back as 1817. She had a wagon. She said, I can move some stuff for you. Had her wagon and her horse or mule or whatever she had, and started her own business, a moving business. They called it cargo hauling, but that's what Sister Butler did. Sally Scott, she owned a vineyard, and she made wine and sold it in 1860. Winemaker. Do we have any black-owned vineyards or wine-making facilities in this country now? We had one with Sister Sally Scott. Lucy McWhorter, you may have heard of her. She's real famous. She manufactured clothing, and she made soap and made candles. Soap, candles. A couple of guys did that who lived out in Glendale, didn't they? And now, down on, what is that, 8th and Broadway, or in that area, they have two big towers called Procter & Gamble, don't they? Started out making soap and candles. That location, by the way, is the site where Henry Boyd owned a furniture company. He was a black man in the city of Cincinnati, and it is said that he made the best furniture in the country, the best beds in the country. And I'm told that there's still one of his beds in a restaurant up in Lebanon, Ohio. I think it's they call it the Golden Lamb, I think it is, upstairs. One of the beds that Henry Boyd made. He was so famous and so skilled in making furniture. He was located right here in Cincinnati. What happened to his business? It was burned down 3 times. Burned down 3 times. The third time he just said he gave up. He couldn't get insurance after that. I wonder who burned his business down. When we talk about Tulsa, we might have a hint about that. So women got into business, and like I said, Lucy McWhorter, she raised poultry, she sold fish, she sold processed foods, all kinds of things that this sister did. And so let's not get into this notion that in the 1800s, the sisters weren't out there taking care of business as well. It was a male-female thing. It wasn't just men. And then we move into the portion of history that deals with black capitalism. Black capitalists, these folks are called. There was a guy out in San Francisco, William Leidesdorff, the first black millionaire. And this is a guy who really passed for white. People thought he was white. They didn't find out he was black until after he died. But he lived in San Francisco. He was a treasurer at one point of the city of San Francisco, but the first black millionaire. Paul Cuffey, you probably heard about Paul Cuffey, who owned a shipping company. Annie Turnbull Malone. Annie Minerva Turnbull Malone. Have you heard about her? She was a contemporary of Madam C.J. Walker. We hear about Madam C.J. Walker. We don't hear too much about Annie Turnbull Malone, but I bet you someone, she's passed on now, Ernestine Mahan, who had the Poro School down on Lynn Street. I bet she knew about Annie Turnbull Malone, because Malone is the one that started the Poro schools. Do you know in 1933, Annie Turnbull Malone bought a city block in Chicago? And some say that she was really the first female millionaire, not Madam C.J. Walker. But I'm not going to argue about it because both of those sisters did well with what they had. There was also a brother named Philip Payton, who was called the godfather of Harlem. He owned so much property in Harlem. In his real estate business, he was called the godfather of Harlem. And there was E.C. Berry over in Athens, Ohio, who had a hotel, the Berry Hotel. And this was in the 1800s. E.C. Berry, Charles Patterson. Did you know, and you be sure to share this with your children, that in Greenfield, Ohio, in 1916, Charles Patterson and his sons manufactured automobiles right here in Ohio. We used to make cars. Now all we do is buy them. And we get big rims and big tires and give somebody else our money and say, man, we got it made now. But we used to manufacture cars. It was called the Patterson, that was made in Greenfield, Ohio. And when the Patterson was made, folks, white and black, started buying them and even canceling their orders for other cars like Chryslers and Packards and all of that. 1916, Greenfield, Ohio, the Patterson. And finally, there was Herman Perry, who had businesses in insurance and banking. A mogul. You would describe him now as the Bob Johnson, or you think of him and you will compare Herman Perry with any major black entrepreneur that we see today. Those are just a few of the entrepreneurs in the 1800s and early 1900s that existed in this country. You should be proud of that. But you can't be proud if you don't know. So I encourage you to do some research. Like I said, get the book by Juliet Walker, The History of Black Business in America. I have other books that I'm going to share with you in part 2 of this Black History program. And it's really incumbent upon you and us to learn our history and to appreciate what our relatives did for us in this country ever since we got here. And like I said, despite the fact that they risked their lives to do business, risked their lives. And we'll talk about that when we come back in part 2 of this Black History program. I really hope and pray that you are at least more aware of the history of black business in this country, the progress that we've made over the centuries, in spite of all of the negativity that most of us already know about. We did wonders. Our people did fantastic things. And it's really important that during Black History Month, we look at those things and we search as much as we can for those kinds of things and pass that information on to our children to make them as proud as we are in my generation of what our relatives did in this country in terms of business ownership.